Welcome to Revolutionize Your Retirement Radio, bringing you insights and strategies to help you create a magnificent and fulfilling second half of life. Here's your host, certified professional retirement coach and best-selling author, Dr. Dorian Mintzer.
I want to welcome everybody. This is the Revolutionize Your Retirement Expert Series, our fourth Tuesday of the month. I'm Dorian Mintzer, owner of RevolutionizeRetirement.com. And I just want to welcome all of you here. And I am just so delighted. Today, our guest is Kerry Hannon. But let me tell you a little about her, and we're in for a real special treat. Kerry is a nationally recognized authority on career transitions and retirement, and a frequent TV and radio commentator who speaks about career and personal finance trends and offers advice. She's author of the award-winning What's Next? Follow Your Passion and Find Your Dream Job, which USA Today hailed as a roadmap for those striking out on their own. Kerry is AARP's jobs expert and is the Great Jobs columnist for AARP.org. She's currently a contributing editor at Forbes magazine, the second verse columnist for Forbes.com, and a Boomer Woman and Money columnist at nextavenue.org, which is the website launched by PBS stations focused on America's growing 50-plus population. She's been engaged in covering careers and individual career choices for the last decade. In 2006, she developed U.S. News and World Report's Second Acts feature. It's a regular column that looks at people who successfully navigate a complex career change midlife and focuses on their challenges and their motivations. She spent more than 2 decades covering all aspects of business and personal finance for the nation's leading media companies, including Forbes, Money, USA News and World Report, the New York Times, and USA Today. She's previously served as staff reporter and personal finance columnist for USA Today and as a writer and editor for US News and World Report, Money, Kiplinger's Personal Finance, and Forbes. Kerry's work has appeared in the Wall Street Journal, Business Week, Reader's Digest, Good Housekeeping, among other national publications. And she's appeared as a financial expert on ABC News, CBS, CNBC, PBS, and NPR. She's author of 7 books, Getting Started in Estate Planning, Suddenly Signal, Money Skills for Divorcees and Widows, 10-Minute Guide to Retirement for Women, You and Your Money, A Passage from Debt to Prosperity, and Trees in a Circle, the Tiknos Pa story. And her new book, which she's going to be talking about today, is Great Jobs for Everyone 50 Plus. And the book just came out this past month. It's really hot off the press. She lives in Washington, D.C. with her husband, Cliff Hackle, and their Labrador Retriever, Zena. I have a fondness for, my dog is Ziggy, who's now out for a walk, so hopefully he won't be barking in the background. But anyway, I am so delighted, and today we're going to be really talking about revolutionizing your job hunt. So, Kerry, I'd like to turn it over to you, and I'd like to, start by just saying you've done so much wonderful writing about encore careers in the past. So maybe you can talk a little about this new book and how it's different and what was most interesting and fun that you discovered in writing the book and the most challenging. That should give you a good start.
That gives me some material to start with, but I must say I'm exhausted reading the intro, so I don't know how I did all that stuff. But I love this topic, and I absolutely love my job, which is the key to all of this. I think with all of us who are interested in this encore career world and what we're going to do with after we've worked at one thing for 2 or 3 decades maybe, what do we do next? And I find it really inspirational, the people I've met as I've traveled around the country who have done really intriguing things with their careers from a standpoint of either doing something completely different or just redeploying in the same area that they were in. But in this book, in What's Next, the book you mentioned before, I did a lot of looking at somebody who really made that complete turn from doing something there with the Navy and then they ran away with the circus, or they were a California Highway Patrol and they became a Nashville music agent. In this book, I didn't look at people who did these dramatic career changes, but it grew out of a column that I was writing for AARP, which was Great Jobs for Retirees. And again, as most of the people on this call are aware of, that we're all living longer, healthier lives. And for many reasons, this new chapter in our lives for work beyond the typical retirement age really got a great deal of focus lately. And people were, because of the economy, of course, a lot of people were continuing to work for the income, but certainly there was the big population that was also wanting to work for the mental engagement. In the column, I used to write about jobs that were great, almost part-time jobs that people could do to augment their retirement and continue to be challenged in their retirement years. But as it grew into the book, it became, hey, these are some jobs you might do part-time, but they can grow into full-blown careers if you're at the lower age spectrum, if you're closer to 50. And so I tried to, initially we had some fun. We looked at what are some great snowbird jobs for people who go away for the winter, or what are some great jobs for people who really just want to work seasonally. You might want to work, I profiled folks who worked at the ballpark, for example, as ushers, or at spring training, or someone who worked for the National Park Service. There are all kinds of those sort of hook kind of ideas. And then looking at jobs that might be great for someone who was a teacher and took retirement, or someone who wanted to explore healthcare work beyond their career as a nurse and so forth. We went at it that way. But as I took aim at this new book, I thought, hey, these are all ideas to tweak people's ideas about the workplace, because it was a time when I started this when we were all fairly gloomy about the employment prospects out there. And I thought people need to shake it up and change the way they look at work. And how can they make it change the dynamic from a fixed view, like I need this kind of job at this kind of salary. Let's look at a different way to get in the door. Maybe it's contract work or what have you, and explore what is it that you really want to do, and how can you be more flexible in your thinking so you can bring more to the workplace.
That's fascinating. So what have you been learning? What are some of the things that people 50 plus can take away?
Actually, I was just thinking too, and I'll step back to that in 1 second. But one of the things you asked me, what was some of the most fun or most intriguing things about the reporting, was interviewing people in their 70s or older who were hell-bent for leather at their work. They loved it. It wasn't about the money for them. It was very much the mental engagement and the physical joy of being relevant, of being needed, if you will. So I just found that there was this energy and drive that I would interview these folks and I would walk away like walking on air because I wanted half of their energy. It was just amazing. And I think the most challenging aspect for them was finding a job that was challenging and not ones that just killed the time until payday or to stave off being bored in retirement. They gave me insight into what some of the jobs that you could do that you could make a difference, and not only in your bank account, but in your good karma account. I like to look at it as. So those were some of the things. And I guess when you were mentioning what was some sort of more difficult things, it was fairly sobering to hear stories of folks who had been shut out of the workforce and felt that it was because of ageism. And we can all talk about that a little bit later, or even if it's not so subtle. But a lot of times midlife, they had their foundations rocked by a job loss. And so they were struggling to get their confidence back and get their feet on the ground. So I think through this book, I really hope to be able to give people the confidence to get their sea legs again and get back out there.
Are there some kind of takeaway? What have you been learning that helps people whose self-esteem maybe has plummeted get some of that confidence back? What are some of the...
I think we all hear this word over and over again, but it really is all about networking. And networking is this sort of weird word, but I joke that one of my mentors always said it's one letter away from not working. And the point is, if you just look around you, I think to build your confidence, you need to reach out to people around you and be open to getting out of the house, pushing back from that computer job search or whatever it may be, and reaching out. And I found that, and I'm sure many of you have too, that people who were in between looking for work and so forth often found openings in what they were looking for in meeting new people through volunteer work. It really was getting out and doing something where you never knew who you were going to meet. And I guess a big takeaway would be networking, and it is never more important than it is today, in the sense that people tend to hire someone who they know. or somebody who they know knows. It's just the way it is, especially in a tight economy. And so there are all kinds of really super ways that you can network that are not, they can be fun. I belong to a great women's networking group, the Transition Network, which some of you are familiar with. And it's just really great. You can get out there and you're going to a play maybe. It's not you're sitting there talking about business, but you make this connection with a like-minded person or hopefully several people, and it moves forward and the ball gets rolling. I think networking comes away again as really the most important piece. The second piece is you cannot escape the need to be ramped up with your technical skills. You absolutely have to have social media skills. You must be engaged online in some respect. You can't hide under a rock. And I'm a huge fan of LinkedIn. To me, it is an essential tool. And I think you need to have a well-rounded profile and a professional headshot with your work experience and your education and your interests and certainly your volunteer work up there. And I think it's really the way business is getting done these days, so you cannot ignore it and certainly not be bashful when you're on there. I think boomers tend to be a little bashful about our accomplishments, and the younger population, the younger generation, not so much. We need to be brag a little bit about what we've done. But if you get on LinkedIn, you can really start searching for people and invite them to connect with you and get recommendations for your work. And there's all kinds of great industry groups and peer groups on the site that really, AARP has one called Work Reimagined that's tremendous. Encore has a wonderful one. So I really encourage people to do that.
That's great. So you think LinkedIn is, in terms of the technology, is probably the most primary site when people are looking for work?
I think it's the business one. It really is. It's the professional side. I have a Facebook account. I have a Twitter account, and I think Twitter is really fun for following people or companies that you might want to interview with. Again, you can learn a lot. You can stay up to what's happening at a potential employer's, their news. You can share ideas with other job seekers. So it's a great way to expand your network. But LinkedIn, and it's strange, I think that it's still a little bit macho on LinkedIn. I don't have hard numbers in front of me on this, but women tend to like Twitter a little bit more, and men seem to gravitate towards LinkedIn. But employers are on there, headhunters are on there, and I also find if people who have said they've identified a company that has a job that interests them, if they can just do a search and say, hey, who do I know that works there that's connected to me? Sometimes that gives you that connection that you least expect that can help you get in front of the person who's doing the interviewing. Again, I just think it's how the job market works these days.
That's really helpful. It's interesting. I was thinking when you were talking about the importance of networking, and LinkedIn is the virtual network, but I was just wondering about some of the gender differences, because women in general, at least I found through my work, women in general connect with people. And you were mentioning about the Transition Network and the book groups. And so women looking for work, I find, are often more out there. And my experience has been it's been harder for men. So I was wondering, as you were writing the book, and then you're saying that LinkedIn is more male-driven, macho-driven. So it may be that's a more comfortable avenue for men. I hadn't thought about it that way until.
I think it is. I don't think you do instant messaging really on LinkedIn, whereas you can, like if you're Facebook, you can all of a sudden start a conversation with somebody. If you're on Twitter, you can all of a sudden start a conversation with somebody. That appeals to women to a certain extent. But I also think that in terms of job search and job flexibility and opening our minds to new ways of doing our work at this stage of our life, I think women, and you're well aware of this with your clientele, is that women are used to working, changing it up, of being flexible, of working different kinds of hours, for working for just employers that are not so mainstream. So I think we're more naturally willing to I hate the word compromise, but to shift our thinking and to be willing to take a chance at something that's a little off the beaten path.
Mm-hmm. I think that's such an important point, and I think we have men and women on the call, so I think it's helpful to think about what the strengths are, and also people have to push themselves out of their comfort zones at times. That's what I'm hearing you say too, of being open to maybe project work or the volunteering, and it's just being able to be out there meeting people rather than staying at home. And it's so easy to feel badly about oneself and end up feeling so defeated that you don't want to get out there. And what I so love about you, Kerry, is that you're really optimistic. There's a lot of gloom and doom, and I think some of it's real, but there's something about that positivity that I think probably helps carry people. I wonder if you could speak a little to that, because I'm always impressed with this kind of upbeat, like a realistic optimism that you have.
Yeah, I think I honestly believe that, because I think when you have a positive outlook on things, it resonates from you. I think people feed off of it. I think it makes you someone that people want to be around, and they're more likely to want you on their team, to bring in and be a problem solver, to be somebody who's not a naysayer, but who's willing to just jump in and make something happen, and believe in their own skills. You really can't ever be in a position to second guess your opportunities. And I think that, Dory, I think having a positive outlook just takes you far. I do believe that there are opportunities that stem from doing this kind of, and we can talk more about what people how they feel about this idea of contract work, but it's not temporary work. I'm talking about really when someone calls on you to come in and do a project for them, and you build it out into a full-time position down the road, or in many ways, a lot of us at this age really want to run our own show. We're sick of working for the man. We really do want to be our own boss, but we say, oh my gosh, we still need the health insurance. The money is the stumbling block. It's how can you piece this together? And it comes back to having a good network, that people that trust you, people that believe in you. You need to exude that, and you need to attract those people back to you.
That's great. I want to there are a few questions that have begun to come in. I thought I could integrate that in. Deborah from California asked, what's your sense about people seeking help? Is it good for people to seek out like a career specialist or a job coach? And if you think so, why do you think it could be helpful, or why do you think it might not be so helpful?
I actually am a big believer in that. And I don't know how intense a session you need or how long you need to do this for, but I really believe that if you can find the right coach, the right person who can take an unbiased look at you, I like the idea of talking to those who know us, our colleagues, our peers, our families, about what do I do best? What are my skills? Help me identify some of these things that I may have forgotten about myself or I take for granted. And that's great. That is good. That's invaluable. But if you can get someone who's outside of your world, who can look at you from a different perspective and push you, I find that to be tremendously useful. And I also that often coaching, you get assignments, you get some homework. So you're focused on how can I improve? How can I push into some of these areas that are a little uncomfortable? It's uncomfortable for me to think about this, or my fear. A lot of us are afraid when we're making a transition in our careers, particularly if it's into a new field. There's the fear certainly of failure, but there's the fear also of success. So if you can talk to a professional or someone who really has these great counseling skills under their fingers there and under their belt, so to speak, that they can guide you in a way that your friends or your cohorts can't, and you certainly aren't able to do yourself at certain stages. That's great. And there's coaches for everything. You have to really do a little homework and talk to people to get referrals and that sort of thing, because to me, it's a pretty broad field these days, and there are even retirement coaches, and I actually write about that as a job possibility in the book, because that's a whole new field. People need coaching to figure out how to deal with their retirement.
Absolutely. Let's stay a little bit more with, there's some questions that have come up around both positivity and the kind of technology. So I thought I would just stay with that for a little bit. Elizabeth from Minneapolis says you're right on about LinkedIn, and that she mentioned in addition that, there are ways that people can endorse each other on that, and that's a very helpful way too, so that if people can endorse you for some of the skills that you have. And one of the questions, let's see, Amy from Pennsylvania says that she's been networking and has gotten some small contract work, but she just wonders, do you have any suggestions on how to find bigger projects? Are there good websites? What have you found that really helps people learn what else is out there?
Two things. To go back to the LinkedIn question, I just think that's fabulous. I think it's really important to get those, if you can reach out and get endorsements and any sort of ways that you can strengthen your profile on LinkedIn. People come through this job area, recruiters and so forth. It is amazing to me, truthfully, Dory. I have a very good friend who's a journalist who found he was called out of the blue for this terrific job. And he had been out of work he'd been freelancing, but he had been downsized from his employer, as many journalists have been. And they completely were attracted to him by his LinkedIn profile. And he was a very high level. And I was so impressed by that. I was like, you're telling me you didn't know anybody there? He said, I really didn't. But so anything you can do to make yourself appealing, there's all sorts of special ways that I can't get into now, but you do these search certain words and how to frame your profile. But you can learn all that stuff. So I'm a big believer in the best you can reaching out on there. As far as building your business, again, there's some great ways when you can get involved, even if we go back to this example of LinkedIn, but there are other places certainly where you can get into these groups, these discussion groups where you can refer to some work you've done. And it's just mouth kind of thing that maybe it builds on itself in ways you don't expect. But look to some of the bigger boards, and you need to constantly be updating your projects and promoting. And this is an era of self-promotion. As I said, it's a little hard for us boomers to do this, but we have to brag on ourselves because no one's really doing it for us. Reach out and don't be afraid to say what you're working on, and go to some of these events, these networking things through your colleges, your universities. I went to a wonderful women's forum for my university 2 weeks ago. And I met these women. It was a women's forum, and I met women who we were all exchanging, hey, you might be able to, I know somebody who's looking for a contractor to do this. And so you just keep building it. Maybe, especially starting on your own, you start small, but I think it can really get rolling.
That's great. I was just going to mention, too, that most communities now, they have what used to be called the unemployment offices. They're the kind of one-stop centers now. And I know around here in Massachusetts, I've spoken at about 5 or 6 of them now, where they have these transition meetings, people in transition. The networking there, plus the support, is so helpful. So people, I think, should check into their communities and see. And you don't have to even go to one in your community. You can look and probably just Google the one-stop centers. I know in Massachusetts that's what they're called. And they're wonderful transition support groups. Another question around the social media from Gail in Lexington, who wonders if you find that personality types influence the kind of social media that people use?
That's a good question. You're probably the one to answer that. I think it's possible. I think people who are maybe a little more reserved are more apt to head towards something that they don't have to engage in any sort of immediate fashion. But in general, it's all about, if we're doing this we're not in there to talk about what TV show we just watched or what we thought about the debate, really. I think it's important. We're on there for a reason, and it's to exchange ideas with like-minded people and to learn about opportunities for ourselves. But this is all about, this is a point about networking too, is that it's not a one-way street. This is a two-way street. You may not be going to something or going online and making this wonderful connection that's going to promote you forward and find great opportunities for you all the time. Often I love reaching out and helping somebody else. And by doing so, ultimately, it really does come back to you when you least expect it, and maybe not even from that person. But it's all about giving and helping other people, and that's woo, but it really works in the networking thing. So you're not asking always. You're giving as much as you're asking.
Which really ties into another question that actually Gail from Lexington mentioned. She wonders, have you found it helpful to talk about relationship building rather than just networking for jobs? And in a way, that's what I'm hearing you talking about right now.
Oh, yeah, that's a brilliant. You know what? Thank you. That's a better way to phrase it. I like that better. I think that is so true. It really, they are relationships. And I try to make a distinction that it's not exactly like a friend. And they become friendships. It might not be like your childhood friend growing up, but you approach it the same way you do any of your friends. You build it by building common experiences together, sharing experiences. So I often talk about, when I say networking, it is relationship. It's let's go grab a cup of coffee. Let's talk about, it's much more low key. If someone's coming through town, say, hey, I can meet you for lunch. And it's not that you sit there and talk about work the whole time. You often talk about your own lives, and that that builds this sort of commonality, and often that's where the trust comes from.
Great. Another question. They were giving some good questions here. Nancy from Summit, I think that's New Jersey, although I could be wrong on that, but she says, I feel like I'm stuck in transition. One day I'm resigned to retirement and making the most of it, and the next day the desire to work crops up. Any suggestions for helping someone arrive at a decision?
I know. It's like I think the U2 song, you're stuck in a moment and you can't get out of it. It really happens. We have this inner drive to make money and to engage and to be relevant and to be needed. And back to some of the things I said early on, and it's really hard to turn that off and say no to an invitation to do something. I think I'd follow your gut on these things. If it's something you want to do, by all means, you should strike out and do those things, because it's all about living. And I think that by pausing and saying, no, I don't have to, I'm just going to go from A to B, I'm not going to do that anymore, that's not, no, I don't think that's a natural progression. I think we do these things in baby steps.
Mm-hmm. Good point. What about, that question ties into just when we think about people 50 and over, it's really the mid-age, and there are these shifts that begin to happen. I just was wondering what you've been discovering about what begins to happen to people at midlife. What do you think compels all of us to take stock and think about success, as you were saying, or how much money we need to make versus want to make? What's your sense of what happens for this population?
Yeah, I think you really hit on something that's important to realize, that is that at this sort of midlife point, if we call it that, is we've often, you've reached a point, and Mary Catherine Bateson writes about this in her terrific book, about this adulthood 2 period, where it's the kids are off on their own, they're raised at some point, you've achieved a lot of the career successes you may have originally outlined for yourself. Those are 2 things that happen. Third thing that happens is, and I'm experiencing this quite a bit right now myself, and I'm in my early 50s, so I'm at the lower end of this, but you start losing people you love. You close friends have cancer, you have health issues yourself start to crop up. There's a sense of mortality starts to sink in, and you wonder, what is it that you're supposed to be doing? What is it that would really bring meaning to you at this point? And I think it shakes all of us on a certain level at a certain time. There's no certain, everyone takes a different path, obviously. And the people I interviewed for my last book, What's Next, it was so apparent that many of them, it was a crisis of some sort that really pushed them to take a new path in their life. And it was, at the time, 9/11 affected a lot of people. It was really a sharp awakening for them that life can end in a snap of a finger, or that's a little too light to express how that was. But if you know what I mean, it was just something that really altered the way they viewed the world. And so I think that is often what propels us to start down a different path. But I caution the people in that book that I profiled as success stories, and so many people do try a transition, and it's not successful because they haven't taken the time to build the blocks that make it successful. And you really need to not do anything rash. You need to take it slowly. And I often tell people, just try to do one thing each day that kind of sets you on your path towards your goal. You don't have to do everything today or everything this month. It's a process. Career transition, especially into a new field, is really a process. And the people who succeed often take 3 years or more to really make that turn. And they do the things along the way that we've talked about in this conversation already. They network with the people they know, and they get a sense of, are they really set for this kind of transition? Secondly, they do the job. They mentor. They go out and they apprentice. They moonlight. Sometimes they get paid. Sometimes they don't. I tell this one gentleman I profiled, it was 9/11 that sort of shattered his world. He lost several friends, and that he worked for Merrill Lynch in the New York area, and he and his wife were great cooks, and they had a gourmet cooking club they belonged to, and he always had a hankering to have a restaurant, and he was from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. He decided he was going to move his family of 4 kids back to Pittsburgh where he could actually go to his kids' soccer and basketball games and so forth, and open an Italian restaurant. But here's the thing, Tim didn't just go open a restaurant. He spent nearly a year moonlighting and apprenticing at every red sauce joint he could find. He bussed tables, he worked as a sous chef, he worked as a bartender. He did every job within a restaurant to see if it suited him. And then he said, okay, it does. And he took the leap, and his wife came on board with him. It's really important to have your family or your partner supporting you. They don't have to own your dream, but they need to be supportive. The kids all work on their school holidays and things. And he's been tremendously successful, but he took a couple of years to do it. He did the moonlighting piece of it. He also downsized. I often tell people you need to make a career transition successful, especially at our age, you're going to be stepping down probably to earning a little bit less than you were, at least initially. And if you're starting your own business, it might take a while to get the income stream back to where you expected it or what you had before. You need to be financially fit. And that involves downsizing, which when Tim moved from the New York area to Pittsburgh, believe me, he saved a lot on his housing costs and his cost of living and everything. If you can downsize, if you can pay off credit card debts, debt is a real dream killer. So if you can get your finances in order and those sort of, so physically fit is the other one. When we talked at the beginning of this, Paul, we talked about being energetic and being full of confidence. And when you're physically fit, I think that really helps you at this age in particular to exude an energy level of a younger person so that it doesn't be apparent that you have an expiration date there. If you're physically fit and financially fit, and the third piece is spiritually fit. And I think everyone needs to have some sort of inner place to go to deal with the stresses that inevitably come from transition in your 50s and 60s.
Those are great points. And I just want to support it all, too. There have been some wonderful comments that Elizabeth from Minneapolis, who does a lot of career counseling, and she's just really feeling like what you're saying is so right on about the positivity and the physically fit, and that from her experience, she's finding that a lot of people want help about this career direction and choice more than ever as people are getting older. And just underscoring again the importance of the LinkedIn group, the joining the group, the profile, all the things that you're saying, and just underscoring what you're saying about the showing up in person as well as online at LinkedIn, because then people think about you when openings come up. And that it's being out there and having faith in yourself and the bragging, all of that are such important issues. One of the questions also that Elizabeth asked is if you had to pick kind of 3 top kind of job areas for people 50 and over, what have you been discovering are good fields for people to think about?
I don't think I'm breaking real new ground here. Some of you already know this, but I think the nonprofit world is a wonderful place to look. Nonprofits are hiring. They come in all shapes and sizes. And if you can find one that really matches something you truly believe in, and it can't be a better fit, I think. So I believe you can take all those skills if you've been in the corporate world and you're a terrific accountant or you're great at fundraising, management of some sort. There are all kinds of jobs within a nonprofit that your skills can transfer to. And if you believe in the cause and the mission, what a win that is. So I think the nonprofit arena is a great one to look towards. And again, the salaries may be slightly less than what you might have found in the corporate world, but it's certainly worth it at this stage in your life. I think we're definitely seeing opportunities in the field of education. And I'm not saying specifically as a school teacher necessarily, but they're in that whole broad scope of things. The community colleges are getting up a real head of steam, all kinds of opportunities in the whole field of training and educating people, workers. Green jobs, again, it's a weird term, but I think any job that if you're interested in the environment, there's great movement on that front. Different companies are all regular mainstream businesses are looking to add somebody onto their team that has an eye for this, that can help them build a recycling program, that can help them be more aware of some of these things. Even green landscaping, for being an eco-landscaper, those sorts of things. You have green jobs, you've got the nonprofit world, education, and I can't ignore healthcare. Again, there's so many layers to all of these broad fields. There's an interesting, and most of you on the call know about this, but the Department of Labor has the occupational handbook. And if you go and look in that, they really highlight some of the job areas that they see as the fastest growing ones over the next 10 years or so. And I would take a look at it to maybe just stimulate some ideas.
What a good idea. I think gerontology is another area.
Oh, yeah, that's a great one, Dory. Yeah. Yeah. And when I have a chapter in the book called Riding the Age Wave, and I talk about different jobs that you can do at this young, vibrant age that can actually serve the aging population just ahead of us. And so we can do there's a variety of things that are out there. One couple I profile here near where I live, they're out in Warrenton, Virginia. They started a store that just caters to the aging population. They sell everything from books of large print crossword puzzles to wheelchairs, or it has gardening devices. They have things that will help your parents and they'll help you, and it's called Simple Comforts. And they've made a thriving business out of selling things and products that an aging population is looking for.
Mm-hmm. Great. I have a few more questions here I'm going to put in, and then I want to also get back to the age discrimination that you mentioned earlier. But Ron from Colorado gives an example of his situation and asks for a little advice. He's 67, his wife's 57, and they have a son in college, so they both need to really keep working. He has, just for an example, he has an engineering telecom background and really doesn't particularly like his job because the manager is pretty dictatorial. So he's looking for other opportunities in the same field, in telecom and engineering, and he just wonders what your experience has been. How much background should he put into a resume? What do you think someone like him could expect? He's conflicted because he says he really wishes he could retire and not have to commute and everything, but he knows that he and his wife both have to keep working for more years. So he's asking a little about the resume and about staying in the same field. And you mentioned before about bragging, but how much background should he include in both the resume and then how much maybe just to bring up? Do you have any thoughts on that from people you've been meeting?
Yeah, I think you're at a stage that a lot of us are at, that we have this set of skills that we're really quite accomplished at, but we want to move on. You get locked into a situation, and it's often, again, when we talked about the money as a stumbling block. So I think that you need to really review your resume and ways that you can highlight and what you're good at, in the sense that people will get a little obsessed with their resumes, but your resume just needs to be simple. I think it needs to be no more than 2 pages. The average resume gets read in like about 10 seconds. So you got to be sure that the content is really grabs somebody, nothing fancy or what have you. These are just some basic logistics, but I tried it to tell people to have a very active resume that has verbs. So you've managed a company doing this, their tax reporting, or that sort of thing. No sort of objectives. I'm not that big on that. I think you don't need a lot of personal information on there, but you really want to tell stories. You want to talk about numbers or statistics or things that you've done that would be interesting narratives for someone to grab onto. There's all kinds of, you want to refer to specific titles that you did and so forth. No sort of fuzzy words. There's some great resume helps out there. I have a chapter in the book on it that's just highlights a few things, but for everyone, it's going to be a little different. But the most important thing is people tend to overestimate who reads your resume. You just want it to be simple and sharp and active and have a little bit of chutzpah in there. In terms of where to look for this kind of work, again, if you belong to associations or groups that are somehow affiliated with what you do, it's great to get out and go to some of those events and find and make some connections and see. Even go to the job boards. Often an association has its own job board, and you can see what's available there. I think that's a great way to do it. And Dori, you may have some other ideas too on those lines, but those are some things right off the top of my head I would suggest.
Yeah, no, I think those are great ways. And just looking, I think the LinkedIn, I'm just thinking about the groups on LinkedIn and just checking out what those groups are. And even Chamber of Commerce in communities can be often helpful places for people to go and meet more people and network around the area, but also trade associations. I think that's a great idea. So Bruce from Massachusetts is complimenting you, Kerry, on this interview. And just as an example of social media, he said he's been tweeting sound bites.
Thank you, Bruce. I appreciate that.
And one of his
that's
questions,
always fun. I'm
right.
glad you did that. Thanks.
But he also asked, how can Encore job seekers accurately estimate the time and cost of reinvention?
Good question, Bruce. I don't think there's a time frame that's right for anyone. And again, that term reinvention is such a funny word, because I don't often think of it as reinventing as much as redeploying yourself. I think you're writing a new chapter or so forth. But you're just continuing on, just maybe in a new, exciting direction that's a little different than yourself. But as I mentioned earlier, I really think you need to give yourself the time to do it right and be willing to make mistakes. You're going to be a greenhorn. It's a huge ego thing for a lot of people. It's really hard. They go into mourning for what they did before when they make a big transition or they start over with a new employer or what have you. It's a psychological thing. You need to be prepared to be a greenhorn, or at least have those supporters around you that say you're really terrific, because no doubt you are. And you need to be prepared for those moments and the setbacks. They're inevitable setbacks. Things may ramp off fantastic, and then things will slow down. So you need to be prepared that everything's not going to go up all the time. And again, and Bruce, you probably know this, and others on this call, is that nothing is forever. We may have a series I like to think of weaving together a whole patchwork of work moving forward. We no longer have to be set on one linear path. I think we can try all kinds of different things at this stage in our life, particularly if some of the big economic things that we've needed to have finances set aside for are a little bit behind us, and we can focus a little bit on doing work that we love and work with meaning. But nothing's forever. Again, look at it like, I'm going to do this for now, and then we'll see what leads from here.
Great point. A few other things that have come up from people's comments and questions. Elizabeth from Minneapolis was underscoring about the importance of modernizing your resume, and that it's really important on your resume to put your LinkedIn URL.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
So that
you got to show that you're doing this. Yeah. Demonstrate by doing. I think I jokingly did a column it's not jokingly. I did a column the other week on how to do a video resume. And you know what? It doesn't work for every kind of job, but if you're in the creative field or whatever, and you do a short video resume, which is like no more than 2 minutes or something, it shows the employer that, hey, this person is a little tech-savvy. They're not a Luddite. They actually got a feel for what's going on out there. Or if you have that LinkedIn connection on your resume, you have a Twitter feed or whatever it is, I think that's huge. And so I highly recommend that. And also, we didn't mention this, have an email that has a professional note to it. I have Kerry at kerryhannon.com. If you can get something that has your name in it or whatever, you don't need any like kind of goofy email address, but something that's very professional. And I think that's important.
Great point. Also, Elizabeth mentioned the website that you mentioned in case people are interested for the Bureau of Labor Statistics. It's www.bls.gov. So,
and just look for the occupational, what is the correct thing? The occupational handbook, I think is all it is.
Yeah, I think that's what you said it was called. The occupational handbook is what I have down here.
Yeah, I'll double check here.
And Amy from Pennsylvania, you had mentioned before about the not-for-profits being one of the good job areas, and she just was commenting that from her experience, many nonprofits are downsizing, especially the human services, because of loss of state funding, and et cetera. And she was just mentioning she has 3 friends in nonprofit management in their 50s who've been downsized. And the only job
that's maybe in regions, but all the surveys that I've been seeing lately are that the plans to hiring this year, 2012, has been up, and with plans moving forward. So I'm hoping that's more, in fact, the case. And I have some great nonprofit websites that in the book that listed, and you can all find them other places too, but they're worth checking out for what opportunities might be out there. There are things like encore.org, which we talked about a little bit before. GuideStar.org is a leading source for nonprofit organizations. Idealist.org lists a lot of volunteer opportunities. And I think when you start in it as a volunteer, it can often grow into a full-time thing. I think that there are a variety of places to look. Bridgestar is another good one. And some people have found it very useful depending on what your area of expertise is. But if you can get into an organization as a board member, full-time work often springs from that as well, because they have a chance to check you out and vice versa.
That's great. Donna from Texas also adds that if people aren't familiar with video, that people can probably even get a video resume done via, I think she says, Fiverr.com, www.fiverr.com. I think that's the website where you can just say what you want, and then I think for $5 or something like that, $5 for a certain amount of time, people will say they can help you. So,
check it out. That's a great idea. I just think the video resumes are really fun. And if you search my name and probably video resume and AARP, you'll find that I did a little video on how to do it. Check it out.
That's great. Let's see. Laura from Oregon wonders, do you find that people 50 plus are really latching on to the various meetup groups that are now specifically targeting boomers? She says that in Portland, Oregon, there are many of those, and they're even replacing long-standing organizations. Are you aware of that?
Oh, I like that. I think that I'd like to see more of that. I haven't encountered a lot in Washington, D.C. myself, but I think across the country that is definitely a movement, and I think that the more we can support each other and connect, anything like that is worth exploring.
Great. And Laura also had a comment. She, in addition to your saying about the professional email, she said it's really important to have a professional voicemail message on your phone.
Oh,
so that when somebody calls you back, it's not the cutesy thing, but much more professional.
Absolutely. And in addition to that, we didn't even talk about when you're on LinkedIn and Twitter, get a professional headshot. Don't do something silly that your friend took of you or you took of yourself with your iPhone. Definitely get a really professional looking headshot. It's worth it.
Great. I want to get back a little because I'm noticing the time, because you mentioned that there is this thing called age discrimination. That maybe it's changing a little bit, but I just wondered if you could just speak up to that a little bit of what you found. I think the statistics say that when you're 50, usually it takes longer to get work. But I wonder if you could talk a little about how people deal with that and how do people craft their second and third acts. And I think you've talked a little about it in terms of the staying fit and being flexible and
having your tech, amping up your tech.
Things, showing people that you really want to keep learning. But I wondered if there are other things that you have learned that might be helpful for people to think.
Well, I think it's really important to not think of yourself as old, but experienced. And also have this openness about there's going to be some question about how are you going to feel reporting to a boss who's younger than you, or working with people younger, and really staying open to that you're not turned off by that concept, that you're open to learning. And I think this whole, you're willing to be a mentor and also to be mentored by somebody who's younger than you, maybe that can really help you with some of these tech areas. I think you need to really stress your flexibility in terms of your management style and that whole going back to the openness. And I mentioned that in some of the points that you have up on your website there, but I think that's really critical. And to stay on top of your game, you've got to show that you've kept up with technology and be prepared that they may ask you about your age, and you have to meet that straight on and say, that's why I think I've got the experience that I can handle. I've seen this before. I know how to handle what employers want you to solve their problem today. They don't really care what you did in the past as much as what you can do for them right now. If you can bring that sort of forward-thinking ability is really critical. So those are the most important things. I think broadcasting that you don't need a lot of hand-holding is going to get you a long way in this world because no one has time to really put into the training. You really need to do that and add any new skills or certification. The community colleges have great certification programs now. So if you're making a transition, you don't need to go back and get a whole master's degree necessarily. But look around and see what are the skills I really need to make this change and to be hired at my age, and make sure you're really current with these things. And there are ways to do that without breaking the bank.
That's great. And that really ties into Bruce from Massachusetts asked how important are taking classes to show that you're ready, willing, and able to upgrade your skills and pursue new learning adventures. And I think what you've just said sounds like it's really important.
Yeah, and keep your resume alive, for gosh sakes. Don't go out and do something, as I mentioned. Do some pro bono work if you need to. Volunteer. You need to keep your resume active. And you can, as I talked about, telling a narrative. If you're doing some great travel experiences or volunteer experiences, you can really talk that up into how that applies to what you're learning today and how that applies to the work you can do and the skills you can bring to an employer. So that's very important. And finally, and as an age issue, I'd be remiss not to tell people to really make sure your appearance. People do judge a book by its cover, so you want to be dressed appropriately. And if you need to get, it sounds silly, but updated eyeglasses or whatever it may be. I'm not saying Botox for women or men, but be sure you look and have a vibrant, you're dressed appropriately for the kind of job you're looking for.
That's great advice. Larry I think we have time for another, and then I have to remember to select a winner for the book. So. But Larry from West Virginia just had a question about the following your gut that you mentioned earlier. And he just wondered if, from your experience, do you think following your gut's easier to do the closer you get to making a decision?
I think so. For me, it is at any rate. And the folks I've interviewed with, the truth is that the individuals who I've met who have really found work they love at this part of their life, they don't second guess themselves. They've come to this decision, and I call it a gut decision, is that once they've made that step, they don't look back. They don't second guess a choice. And to me, it's that sort of sense of confidence that really propels you to being a success in what you've chosen to do. And in that regard, it really pays to have that sort of inner confidence and following. And I think our guts, if you sit quietly and do that sort of that spiritual fitness side of it, if you can sit quietly with yourself and really allow it to show you your gut, I think my experience is it does show you what the right option is.
That's great. I just wanted to also, Gail from Lexington mentioned, and I remember just saw it on Monday too. On Monday in the Wall Street Journal, they had this retirement section, and they listed the top 10 careers for older workers, and they included education, financial services, healthcare, just underscoring.
Yeah, the financial services one I didn't hit on, but I'm telling you, it's huge. I even see with my mom, who's in her 80s. It's my sister and I have been helping her with her bill paying stuff. But if you can offer services to the aging population to help them understand, patient advocate is huge. Helping people understand their health care bills and getting through the claims things for health things is a financial sort of offshoot. But there's a variety of financial things that you can help riding that age wave as a financial person and guiding people with some of these very important decisions they make as they get older and helping them manage their finances from day to bigger picture health care.
Great. This has just been wonderful, and there have been many comments that have come in just saying, thank you so much, Kerry, and I just think that this has been terrific. I knew that you were from the before, but any last little takeaway that you want to leave people with as we say?
I just say, have fun. Again, there's so many wonderful work opportunities out there that it's just opening your mind to the possibilities and go job hunting. Just enjoy it. Actually, don't think of it as a job.
Mm-hmm. That's probably the best advice yet. Enjoy it, be positive, and present yourself and recognize. And I love the idea of bragging. I think you're right. We so often just want to hide behind. And I think you need to be out there and just as you were saying.
Or you think your resume speaks for itself. Like, can't you see that I've done all these wonderful things? No, they can't. They're going to read it in 10 seconds. You need to be able to tell them quickly.
Great. Thank you so much. And I want to thank all of you who are on the call live, and also those of you who will be listening to the recording. And just want to remind you that Kerry's book is available through Amazon. There may be other, and probably bookstores, Barnes and Nobles. It's great jobs for everyone 50 plus. And I want to recommend her prior books too that I mentioned at the beginning. And you can follow her on Twitter, and you can check out RP. And
Twitter is just at Kerry Hannon. You can find me.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much, and I hope that everybody will join us November 27th. Remember, you have to sign up at www.revolutionizeretirement.com. So have a great month, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Revolutionize Your Retirement Radio with Dr. Dorian Mintzer. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show, listen to past episodes, or download our free retirement transition guide, visit revolutionizeyourretirementradio.com.